society that young people are apathetic. You know, we're told that we don't care about anything but ourselves. We're the me generation. We only care about our Starbucks and our MacBooks. I have seen exactly the opposite in my experience. I have seen young people who care so deeply about the people around them and the environment and social justice and racial justice. And they are actively putting forward their vision for a better world. And that is what the book Power of Youth is all about.
There's been a long-standing debate in terms of reformist versus revolutionary organizing, that at a strategic level those aren't mutually exclusive. So how do we imagine really visionary organizing that really shifts the ideological terrain, where we're talking about systemic issues like capitalism and colonialism and oppression, not being afraid to name those systems, but also being able to win victories within those systems.
Both the Casa Oil and the Occupy movement of the last year I think really highlight all the strengths and weaknesses of the progressive movement, and at least in the rest of Canada. Quebec, they have it a little more together. I think the last 6 months we've all been recharged and inspired and sort of reimagined what's possible in our movements and in our struggles because of the Quebec Printemps Érable, the Maple Spring. The specter that haunts them at night, if you will, that there will be a revolutionary movement in the sense of complete shift in our priorities as a society, right? Getting off the big oil economy, ending all the subsidies to the tar sands industries.
Called The Weathermakers by a man named Tim Flannery. And in reading that book, I came to have a really clear image of what climate change was going to look like at this critical moment in 2050. But then I got involved in climate issues because I realized that's what maybe my life would be measured by, is the world that would be left at that point. I think nowadays what we should be looking at is how many times have we passively witnessed the literal end of the world? And what does that mean for us as young people? Has it desensitized us to the very concept of a global crisis? And Marshall McLuhan said that if we wanted to evaluate how our children would be educated, we should take the annual budgets for advertising and compare them to the annual budgets for education. And you would see where our kids would get their real education.
I think everybody can make that equation and figure out how their life can fit in with this type of work, because we need more people, we need everybody to do this type of work for it to be successful. And we based all of our work on that idea, on this idea of that this generation is ready to see something new, and they're ready to help build it, and they're ready to work together, and it's just a matter of time until we reach that critical point to where, I mean, it's already happening in my mind, that the media doesn't report it, but there's incredible things that are happening where people are building new energy systems and new forms of living, and new ways of creating society.
Now it is a pleasure to introduce Gabriel Nadeau-Dubois. He was the lead spokesperson for PLOS, one of the most militant student unions during the Quebec student strike. And
thank you for letting me speak tonight. I will begin my short speech by the usual apologies that I always do when I have to speak my second language, which is English. I learned to speak English in the last 6 months, being a spokesperson for this which makes that I can pretty currently talk about austerity, but I am very uncomfortable to order a burger in the restaurant. I will try to do my best to be understood today. I think I accepted to talk because I think it would be a little bit incoherent to talk about youth and activism in 2012 in Canada without saying a few words about what happened in the last months in Quebec. I will not talk about me. I've always considered myself as a spokesperson and not as a leader, so I think my personal story is not really relevant here tonight. I'll try maybe, I've taken a few notes to maybe explain what was, I think, at the core of the mobilization this spring in Quebec. The first thing I want to be clear on is that for me and for class, the actual conflict that occurred in Quebec in the last month was not a generational conflict. It was not a conflict of generations. It was not a conflict between the young and the old. It's the kind of cliche that the mainstream media love to say, but I don't think it really describes what is the source of the movement that we saw. For us, this movement is not a generational conflict. It's a class conflict. A class conflict. Why? Because underneath this decision of the Liberal government in Quebec to raise tuition fees, there is a try and a strong will to privatize the universities. Why privatize universities? Because capitalism, well, I don't know if it's hopefully or not, because we don't know by why it's going to be in place, but is dying since the end of this wonderful period of growth that we have seen in the last decades. Growth now in the northern economy is more and is slower and slower. So capitalism needs new markets in order to continue to grow. And public services is that new market that is being commodified to, give electroshock. Do you see that link? Electroshock to this dead body that is already capitalism. So universities and post-secondary education as a place to create new ideas is very interesting for the ruling class, and state in this and the role of state in this system is to construct those new markets, those new spaces of financial accumulation. And so sometimes we say that neoliberalism is, the end of the intervention of state in society, and that neoliberalism is the fact that state is going out of society and of economy. I think tuition increase and commodification of education and public services is the proof that, in fact, the logic of neoliberalism is the opposite logic. So neoliberalism is not state going out of society, it's state doing more and more and more intervention in society and in the lives of the population in order to create artificially markets in areas that were not commodified before, just like education, just like health, just like a lot of environment also. So there is this plan, let's say, of the ruling class and of the state and of the politics to really create artificially those new markets, and that is what is beyond the surface of the tuition increase. So that's why I say, that's what we have said in the last month, that was a class conflict, and that our fight was not only a fight to keep accessibility to education, which is obviously very important, and that, but also to prevent capitalism from eating the last part of the society who are not yet completely integrated into its life. So that's a little bit what I wanted to say. I also want to talk a little bit, because I said it's not a generational issue, but objectively the mobilization started and was sustained by the students that are in majority young people. So if the issue is not a generation issue, there's a generation aspect to the mobilization itself. And I think there is a very precise reason for that. Being that, because I think this decision of increasing tuition fees is not only an attack, like I said, to accessibility to education, it is also an attack to the freedom of the young people. Why? Because the first consequence of an increasing of tuition fees is not that on accessibility to education, but then on student debt. And I think we often forget how debt is a strong disciplinary process for individuals and for the young and for the youth. So when you create debt, in fact, you already put in the head of a young man or woman of 17 years old the idea that education is a commodity. Because if you know that going to university will give you a debt of $40,000, you will seriously should begin to shop your education, and not because you're a villain capitalist, just because if you have this this massive debt waiting for you at the end of your education, well, you will want to choose a good university that will bring you a good job. And so when you increase tuition fees, you create debt, and when you create debt, you insert completely the youth into capitalism and prepare them already to be obedient consumers and obedient clients and customers for the banks. And I think that's what I think that's what the Quebec youth felt this spring, is that we were trying to put golden handcuffs on us, saying that we will have very good universities, but we know that the price of that is the loss of our freedom and the loss of democracy. And I think that's why the young people who have been like the spark and who have started who have started this mobilization. I think I have to stop, so I will. But I will just finish by two stories that I wanted to tell you on a more, because that was a little bit complicated, but let's very simply tell you two stories that I think really show the power of our mobilization and how this mobilization already has completely changed the Quebec society. The first example of this is, and I think those stories are going to give you guys a lot of hope to think that those kind of mobilization could also be a reality here in English Canada. The first story is, we had one of the first colleges to vote the strike is Collège Maisonneuve, which is a pretty big college in Montreal. There's about 6,000 students there. And we organized this General Assembly where the vote to go on strike is taken. And there are 3 gymnasiums in this college, and they're one over the other. And there were 4,000 students that showed up to vote on the issue of the strike out of 6,000. So that's very impressive. And then we filled up all those gymnasiums, and just before the assembly began, there's the director of the security of the college who comes to the mic and says, well, we're going to ask you when the assembly is over not to all move at the same way, in the same direction at the same time, because the structure of the college is not built to have so much people in it at the same time. and when he said that, obviously the crowd went crazy, because it was, and then everyone realized that something there was happening that was like totally out of the normal things, even out of the normal thing that is a student strike in Quebec. And then personally, I personally at that point realized that something very unusual was going on, because our mobilization power was so strong that it was even geographically unbearable for our school. Like our own schools were not built for so much mobilization, and we have good architects. I mean, it's just to show how much it has been. So at that point, I realized that something was going on, and I have to say also that 1 year before that, 1 year ago, in this same college, we had a lot of difficulty to have 50% in our general assembly, and now we have so much people. The college cannot was not built for it. So it's this idea that 1 year ago we could never have predicted what happened in the last month, and it was very surprising. And so I think that if there are some students activists here who are sometimes desperate at the level of mobilization of their colleagues, well, I can tell you that I was feeling exactly the same way 1 year ago, and now I'm so proud of being one of the spokesperson of this wonderful generation that mobilized in Quebec. That's the first story I wanted to tell you. The second one is a story that a journalist told me. He's a mainstream journalist in a big right-wing newspaper. He's pretty right-wing. He's a journalist. He wrote opinion articles, always against the students. And one day he came to me to tell me that story. He's living in a neighborhood in which there were a lot of casserole, and he has 2 kids. He has an 8-year-old little girl and a 4-year-old boy. And his little girl liked this idea of banging because it's fun. And she always asked him, can we go? And he always said, well, you know, I'm a journalist, so kind of touchy for me. I have to be more like, I can protest, I have to analyze it, you know, blah, blah, blah. And so I won't go. But she keeps asking him, we have to protest, I want to go, not protest, because she doesn't want to protest. But she said, I want to go to the casserole. And he says no. And one day he says, okay, well, you can go to the corner of the street, and there's the casserole's there, but bring your little brother with you. She said, okay, and she's all laughing, and they take the casserole. And then when they go out of the building, the father, so the journalist, hears the little boy asking to his sister, why are we going to protest? And then her grand sister says something wonderful. She says, you know, the government don't want us to protest, so we protest. The journalist is like, oh my God. What happened to my children? He comes to me and so a few days ago he comes to me and he tells me that story and he says, Gabriel, you know, we don't agree, but you guys, you have done something that is unbelievably strong. You are really changing Quebec completely. You have, you know, gave birth to a very non-precedented level of politicization among the youth. Even my 8-year-old daughter, you know, is like, you have put in his head this idea of resisting to power when power goes too far. And I wanted to end my presentation on that, saying that this movement, it is still very beautiful, but that all those beautiful stories, they happened not out of magic, they don't happen because, you know, Quebec social movements are so cool. No, they happened because we were hundreds of student activists working for 3 years in our campuses. We were up each morning at 6 o'clock for 3 years to distribute those leaflets, you know, and we talked to every student in every campus of the province to get this strike started. Facebook and Twitter are very beautiful things, but you will never start a mass movement like that. And maybe that's what I want to finish on, is to invite you to remember that mobilization has to be firstly going talk to everyone, and we have to convince. I think our first strength is that we are right. But if we don't go and see every people and tell them we are right, well, we will not convince them. So that's why I think we should all do in the next years in order to get this economic system done.
How can we say young people are apathetic when there are hundreds of thousands of students who are mobilizing for free education for everyone? And we see how this is happening in Chile, this is happening in Greece, this is part of a global awakening of so many different young people. Okay.